Anyway, my name is Karen Fetter. Like you said, I'm the director of ITAD for Blancco. We provide data research services and diagnostics, PCs, laptop servers, and mobility devices. And my panelists are, starting on that side, is Reich Sandlin, who's the founder of River Vista Partners, has a very strong ITAD background. I'm going to let them say whatever they want. I'm just going to do a quick high-level introduction. Bob Trulove is the Director of ITAD Sales and Services at RAND Technology. And Todd Zegers is the VP of ITAD and Reverse Logistics at Ingram Micro. We did a session. How many of you were in, I can't see, how many of you were in Miami? A lot of you. Okay, and so, there's a lot of you that weren't. That's great. Well, welcome. I hope it's as enjoyable as for you as it has been for us that have been coming since the beginning. The one thing we did last time is we did not get to all the questions that I brought because we had so many questions. The topic is revealing hidden opportunities and pitfalls in data destruction. And based on the questions, instead of waiting to the end, it's more important for your questions to be answered by our panel than it is for them to answer the ones that I've got. So I encourage anybody, and if it's hard to see with the lights, so if you raise your hand and I don't see you, just please stand up and start talking and I'll stop. So we'll start with Reich with our, did I get louder?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'll start with Reich with our first question, which is, based on the major data breaches that we've seen in the last year, are more opportunities being created in the ITAD market? And what is the kind of shift in services that you're seeing that your clients are wanting to provide?
Yeah, so it's a good news, bad news story. None of us want to see data breaches occur. But for this business, what it does is it raises awareness in the marketplace of the risks of data breaches, of data excursions. As Karen mentioned, I've been around the industry for a long time. I ran an ITAD operation, and I've been involved in I guess about 15 years of ITAD services. Most recently, I've started a consulting business, so I'm helping other companies figure out how to address those risks, how to come to market with a set of services that meets enterprise needs to avoid those data breaches. But to answer your question in short, is I think the increased awareness among enterprises is a key part of the result of those data breaches.
And are there any kind of services that your clients are being asked for that maybe historically they haven't been?
We're seeing a lot more interest in on-site services, both for end user gear, but also for data center decommissioning. Certainly, as things move to the cloud, you're seeing a lot more private data center decommissions, and so making sure that my clients can provide those services on site effectively and economically is key.
Either of you want to add to that?
Yeah, I read my paper, took all my answers, but yeah, we do see an opportunity to upsell for the on-site services to do more data erasure on site. At the very least, encryption verification, that kind of stuff. We're seeing an increase in that because of data breach does raise awareness. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. I think we've had customers, from 10 years ago that used to require on-site erasure, degaussing, or shredding, or whatever it may have been. And I would argue that the progression of the percentage of our clients who used to do it versus who do it now hasn't gone as accelerated as I would have expected by this day and age. Even with obviously there's encryption stuff out there and everything else. There's still a lot of customers that are still okay sending their assets in with data on them because they feel like it's encrypted. But what I've noticed is if there's a specific breach within a specific vertical, whether it be retail or banking or something else, all of a sudden you'll have a couple of those customers that say, "Oh, crap, my CFO or my CIO is asking me how we're handling this, and now they actually want to go back and start moving to on-site services." So I think that's still growing. Where we're seeing a lot more growth now is the customers want to do self-servicing, right? They actually want to buy Blancco licenses from us directly and do it themselves, and they still want to have us verify or even erase the second time once it gets back to our site, just so. Obviously, the issue of having your own employee do the erasure is how do you record it in the past, right? Oh, I did a format of the disk, or I used this semantic tool to wipe it, but there was never a timestamp. Now customers are wanting to buy it to get that timestamp to record that record, and then obviously have the secondary backup from the ITAD vendor, which, to us, if you're on an operation, if you can get your customers to do the data erasure on site, obviously it lowers a lot of your risk during transport. And obviously once you get back to your facilities, if it's already wiped, obviously you're going to plug in Blancco Asset Manager if they're using Blancco, verify it's been wiped, then obviously it's going to get your production time a lot faster, because once you scale in this business, the line of racks of hard drive erasure that takes however long, was it a minute per gigabyte or something, now you've got 500 gigabyte drives, you can really free up a lot of your production space. So we're proactively trying to get our customers to even buy Blancco erasure licenses to do it themselves. We encourage it. And it helps with your legal department when you work for large companies who legal beagles want to be all up in your business, let's say. If customers are willing to do that step themselves prior to us taking title or taking those assets from their premises, we can typically give a little bit more leeway in our contracts and our liability language.
Okay. Any questions yet? Okay, we'll keep going. What kind of potential risks are you seeing your clients and your prospects wanting to discuss that may not have been as important to them in the last year or two, let's say?
Me?
Sure, why not?
For me, one of the things we're seeing is that risk of being sole sourced, which, of course, when I was at Arrow was bad news, right? Because we wanted all of everything, everybody's assets from everywhere. Now, when I'm with a smaller company, I like the idea of there being multiple vendors, right? Of not being sole sourced. So that's one thing that really sticks out in my mind so far, is that I'm seeing different from clients. And it might be just my perspective now is a little bit different, but that is one thing.
Okay. Todd or Mike?
I think obviously on top of the on-site erasure thing, and Bo talked about this earlier in his conversation, was this whole thing around limits of liability, right? This is becoming a real stickler in the space, because everybody thinks that, well, I'm just going to shove this down your throat. Either you accept unlimited liability, or we're going to tell you to pound sand, or we're going to walk away and go find another vendor. And 90% of the time they come to their senses when you actually have a meaningful conversation with a business person within the legal department, and they get that. I think that's a big challenge. One of the things we struggle with, and I don't like seeing it, is customers asking us to do legal holds on their devices, right? So if they have terminated employees, they're going to send some laptops to you, and they want you to hold those or harvest the hard drives out to store those hard drives. That to me is a bad practice, because what are you going to charge them, $1 an asset a month or something? I have to store it, so your upside from that is very minimal, but the risk that's involved with that is significant. And if you send them back a hard drive, you may have taken perfect care of it, but if it bounced in the FedEx truck the wrong way and the drive went bad or something like that, you're obviously exposed to great risk. So that's probably the one thing we're seeing more clients asking us to do. And that's one thing I tell my team all the time: stay away from it, because it's a no-win situation. You're not going to make enough money ever to justify that type of service. So that's something we try to stay away from, but we do it.
I think there's increased awareness or concern around mobility devices, that really the proliferation of devices. Mobile phones, tablets, IoT, network gear, all these different devices are just exploding right now, and will continue in years to come. And so companies are seeing that and are trying to get on top of it sooner rather than later. So that's an important part of the risk formula that ITAD players need to understand.
Do you have anything to add, Bob?
No, I'm good. I started that one.
Okay. Moving on, do you see any changes in the corporate climate addressing ITAD needs? I'm not including those that are affecting the Arrow closing. That we'll address separately. But is there anything different that you've noticed prior to that or even post that?
Honestly, the only thing that comes to mind that's really a pain on my side is the limits of liability situation. That's the number one battle we fight on a daily basis, is customers asking for that. Other than that, I don't think the Arrow closure really had much impact as far as hopefully feeding a lot of us in this room to grow our business and everything else. But yeah, the thing I lay at night and worry about is the new business ramp that I got to deliver to corporate of new revenue that is stuck because of the limits of liability. But other than that, I don't think there's a lot of major things in the corporate climate I'm seeing, at least.
Yeah, I think and Brent touched on it on his, the integration with the ServiceNows and those, you're starting to get more demand for that, so it becomes more automated. So that's one thing that I think we're seeing a lot more of.
And I think that, in terms of the interest in certifications, that seems to continue to grow in corporations. It's not been a spike in growth, but it's just a continual increase in All right, what standards are you certified to? Are you current? Tell me about your downstreams. Tell me about your data security practices that are part of that certification. So there's more sophistication in the questions being asked.
Okay. I'm going to take a break and see, are there any questions so far? Yes, sir.
This might be a little far out as far as timing. Have you guys seen any uptick at all in interest in the data that's going on automobiles that are being either recycled or totaled in car accidents or whatever, or even taken back in the used car arena where that data, there's some concern over wiping that data on those cars?
Yes. I've talked with a number of auto recyclers, and they're starting to become aware of their liability there and some of the issues. Those that pull parts from the cars before they crush them, of course, they're concerned about the data ramifications, and then those that simply crush, again, they're concerned, are they actually destroying that data as part of that? It's also becoming of interest in the rental car business, right? So you rent a car and you plug your phone in or Bluetooth it, and all your stuff's downloaded to the car. And if you don't actually go through the steps to reset to factory, your information, or at least a part of your information, is still out there. So I think there's more and more awareness about data on vehicles, but I don't think it's enough concern yet. I think that really needs to increase.
We don't play in that space at all. I've never had to deal with it.
Yeah, we don't either, but sounds like an opportunity for Blancco.
Yes, it does. It was really interesting. One of our VPs, his brother rented a car, Bluetoothed it, and a few months later, he actually wound up in the same city in the same car, and all his stuff came up automatically. It was very bizarre, and we looked at it at one point, and this was several years ago, but I'm sure at some point we'll be looking at that again, maybe sooner than later. I think there was another question in the back. Yes. I'm sorry I can't see you, but I know there's a hand. Hi, Brad.
Have you been successful in transitioning your customers from the language of DoD to this?
I would say yes. Mike, we've got some customers over to it. Obviously, the second you bring that up, that's going to be a lower burden or less wipes. They want, okay, well, how much are you going to take off the price of my service? Exactly. I say, well, maybe DoD is the right thing for you. No, but I would say, we always try to encourage our new customers that are coming on board that we follow this standard. If they want to go to a 3-pass wipe, if for whatever reason they want to do that, we're willing to do it. But obviously, there's a deeper operational burden, so we'd like to try to upcharge for that. But we've been, you have some customers that are just more procurement people that are you're just a commodity to them, and you have like true IT asset managers or guys or gals who really get the business and understand what we're really doing. Those folks are always very amenable to letting us go to a single pass wipe to follow the NIST standard. Is that your question, basically?
Yeah, and kind of a follow-up, and maybe it's part of your answer, but moving some of those traditional organizations that know of DoD, what kind of language, or is it white papers, information that no longer is provided? How deep are those conversations going with those organizations to get them to transition up?
I would say we probably do it quite a bit. My personal opinion is why more companies don't move to that is because the thought of going back and changing a contract with everything else they have on their plate for that day to do basically the same service to them, it's just not worth their while. It's not a fight that they want to take up. That's been my perspective.
Yeah, agreed. But it's just an educational process. You just got to keep banging on them. But to your point, when we were doing it before, first thing he says, "Oh, how much less now?"
Right.
Right.
Takes a third of the time.
Yeah.
Take a third of the cost.
Take a third of my cost on it.
Not so much, but yeah.
Right.
Thanks, but no. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, there seems to be not really consensus on solid-state drives. What weight is sufficient enough? Just wondering if you feel like that has got to a point of consensus and what that is, or just your.
It's a great question for Karen.
I didn't.
Yeah, I was
couldn't
thinking the
hear
same
a thing I apologize. I couldn't hear a thing you said.
So solid-state drives, to my knowledge, there's not consensus as far as what it really takes to wipe or purge the data off them with software.
So I'll start by saying I'm not the technical person, and you're more than welcome to stop by our booth, not for me to try to sell you, but we do have somebody that can answer it on a more technical level. It doesn't it's not addressed the same way as a spinning drive because of the fact that the data's in different places. The way we approach it is we have a patented process that has been verified by third parties that assures that the data has been done. If you want to know exactly how do they get to all the nooks and crannies, there is a way to do it, and we're doing it. But that's one of the things is when the solid states first came out, and I'm looking at Todd. Anyway, I was at an event with Todd, and he asked that question, and the solutions weren't there yet, and I was cringing. It's a different way. It's not a spinning drive. It's a totally different process. And there are companies out there that can do it, but I think you have to be very careful when you choose that eraser company to make sure not only that they're saying that it's been done, but that there's third-party verification that it has been done, because it can be done. And I've got to, if you see me afterwards, I can send you some documentation. Not, like I said, not sales documentation, but you know how it's done.
So maybe I have one follow-up. Do you treat solid states differently? Do you charge differently, or are they just like any other hard drive, just for the
It's inclusive with us.
Yeah, we don't, yeah.
Right.
I think that many in the industry think of it as a charge for handling the data destruction, data sanitization, regardless of what form it's coming to you in. It's a charge to do that. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's inclusive. We do the same.
I was kind of hoping this topic was dead like 2 years ago, but it's still raising its head.
Yeah, let's put it to bed.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll keep going. Okay, so let's get to, I'm not going to, I'm calling it the elephant in the room, but I do want to, and I think people in the audience would want to know what your perspective is on what are the long-term effects to the industry, other than everybody getting all these RFPs now and going after the business. What kind of changes are there to the industry as a result of Arrow's decision? And then do you think that the industry as a whole is going to adjust in any way because of their closing?
I think that the industry's healthier now, because you don't have one player that's sort of has the bully pulpit that is really putting downward pressure on quality of service. We saw that with Arrow, that they were trying to fit all the clients into their box for how services work. No offense.
We'll talk after.
Yeah, I was there too. Yeah, but and so I think quality of service is a way to differentiate yourself, and you can really. I think client base is going to appreciate the better service that many of you provide.
So I have two hopes. One that, and it's been touched on a lot today by all the speakers, of what the value is of what we do. I hope the price goes up. That's one. You know, I hope we don't all, because we're all going for the same people, that we don't drive the price down and commoditize it more, right? I hope that we're able to say, okay, look, this is a value, and someone just left you high and dry. We don't want that to happen again, right? And then, of course, the other thing from my perspective is I do hope the reemergence of the strong regional players. I mean, Arrow bought like 7 of them and made it into one. And, you know, there's still a lot of other strong regional players out there, but I hope that reemerges for obvious reasons for my bottom line, so.
I think the biggest impact it's going to have is not so much on guys like us. I think it's in the regional, even the small kind of local players. Because if you're a $2 million company, or 5 or 10 or even a $20 million ITAD company, now you can go out there and bring on contracts that can grow you, 25 or 50%. What I've experienced in my journey in this business is until you hit about $50 million, and even now at our level, I'm not going to disclose what that is, but the lumpiness in this business is very difficult to manage, right? Especially with your labor force out there, because you could get a great load in today, you process it through tomorrow. The next thing you know, you got another load coming in, it's all garbage, and now you got to, you're doing decon work versus high value work on recovery over here. So I think a lot of the small to mid-sized players that have maybe been treading water, I think should really benefit from this. But I also am starting to see now, as private equity guys are starting to dip their nose back in the water in the industry, seeing that some of these 10, 20, 30, $40 million ITADs are going to start popping up now. And now it makes sense to make a play again to try to go buy 4 or 5 of those to put those things together in something. And obviously, hopefully, they don't make the same mistake that Arrow made and trying to jam a square peg in a round hole the other day.
Yeah.
I think it's a great. I think what you guys. It's a great opportunity for the industry for all of us. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Chase those RFPs.
There's plenty of those. Yeah.
So Europe has GDPR regulation, and it's had a ripple effect, obviously, in the US if anybody has a client that, has anything to do with them. But do you think the US is going to adopt something similar, and how do you think that's going to ultimately impact the ITAD firms and the clients?
Do you mind if we punt this question to a member of the audience? Bob Johnson, do you want to answer that one? At eScrap, Bob gave us some great insight as far as what's coming in California. Unless you guys know, I don't want to butcher it.
No, well, Brent this morning gave up, how many new laws are out there, so.
But Bob, there is something now where if you're Boeing, for example, and you have passengers on an airplane, probably a bad example, but you're now going to have to be able to disclose to your customers who you're sending your materials off to be wiped, erased, destroyed, et cetera, right?
Do you want to come a little closer, Bob, so we can all hear?
So you think about the transparency of that, right? I mean, we have ISO 27001. We didn't get it just to go get it. We had a customer that required it, right? But I could see where a 27001 or a NAID is going to start becoming table stakes to be able to handle this stuff if they're going to have to disclose the type of information, right? So going back to what Bo was talking about earlier on certifications, I mean, certifications is probably going to be more important than ever before, especially around the data security side versus just purely a focus on the environmental side, would be my perspective.
Yeah, well put.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Any follow-up questions on that from the audience? Boy, we must be doing a great job.
Because we called on Bob.
Okay. Do you see any risks to the ITAD industry as a whole, and is there a way to mitigate them?
Risks to the industry. There's always risks to the industry, and if you have loose practices that don't have good process controls, then you're risking your whole business on a data breach. Data getting out the door, or because your business is dependent. Your business is protecting your client's brand, and if you're not protecting that brand, then you really are sacrificing your business. So certifications like NAID, ADISA, of course R2 and e-Stewards are ways to reinforce your processes and ensure that you've got those controls in place to avoid those risks.
Well, from a business perspective, and I was looking at it, we're starting to hear threats of insourcing, of people actually trying to do this themselves, which they'll find quickly is a really bad idea. But yeah, we're starting to hear that, which I haven't heard for years and years. And why they would want to do it, I don't know. But, and then of course, we're all facing the fact that the assets aren't worth what they used to be, right? The valuation from the remarketing side, as well as for straight high-tech companies, devices or service is a threat to us because we don't have that front end. We don't have that whole life cycle, right? So those are the three things that stick out in my mind, so.
I think we have a lot of headwinds, to be honest with you. I think on the scrap side of the house, with the commodities markets being down, the whole plastics thing, and obviously with Asia's, restrictions on imports, China's national sword, Africa starting to make some moves around bringing that stuff in. So as more and more of that stuff has to get recycled domestically, right, who's going to pay for that? Is that going to be the end user corporations? Are states going to be pushing back for more producer responsibility laws back to the OEM? It's going to have to come from somewhere. If you think about these certifications you're going to have to get around data security and everything else, right, that's not free. So all of our cost of doing business is going to go up from that. I drove by Chick-fil-A the other day, and they're paying their workers $16 an hour to fry chicken and fry French fries, right? So if I'm paying a guy in the warehouse 10, 11, 12 bucks an hour, then go to Chick-fil-A and get 30% more. That's a significant amount of money to those folks. So I think our labor costs are going to be a challenge. Obviously, fuel costs aren't going to stabilize anytime soon. Your cost of insurance is going up. The cost of your building is going up. So you've got the headwinds of declining commodity values. You've got your increased cost to do production. You got increased costs of I'm not trying to paint doom and gloom. I'm trying to kind of paint what I see coming our way. And we've got to get ahead of that as an industry, right? And start making sure that customers who used to charge, whether it's $5 an asset or $10 an asset or whatever per pound in the past, where maybe you got 5 cents a pound for plastic or whatever the number may be, now you're going to pay 20 cents plastic. That's a huge swing, and you're going to get a lot of these low-value commodities. And we see some customers that are upping their refresh cycle. They always say that, but you always see them slide. So if you start getting what Bob was talking about, these customers are going to hold on to these assets longer because they can access through the cloud. They don't need a lot of computing power. Those will have a lot less value at the end of the road. And if it's less precious metal, more plastics in there, et cetera, it's another negative driver. So I think we've got some headwinds coming, in my opinion. We got to get in front of.
Okay, conversely, did I miss somebody? Okay, conversely, where do you see the biggest areas of growth for our industry?
I think obviously IoT is exploding. And there's a lot of different directions that's exploding. Everything from wearables to commercial IoT and drones to the Alexa Echo Dot in your house. It's really massive out there, and has big data security and privacy implications. And so I think there's opportunity there, but there's also risk, and we as an industry need to figure out how to effectively serve that need.
Yeah, and the same thing, basically, IoT is coming for sure. And it's more diverse, right? It's going to be a whole lot of different types of assets, whole different ways to process them and to wipe the data. It's going to be a challenge, but it certainly is an opportunity because there'll be more devices. To your point, I think Brett said earlier, you used to have a PC and a monitor. Well, now we all got, 10 times that on our own desk. And, as more IoT stuff comes, it's even going to be a bigger number, more opportunity, but also more diverse from a processing perspective. So
I think the biggest opportunity is wrapping additional services around your customers outside of just doing standard ITAD, then you go to on-site erasure, on-site audits, maybe you're doing installation, move, add, change, relocation services, et cetera. I think that's a big opportunity because if your customers are already trusting you with end of life and the data security piece, what's the harm in going one step up the ladder within the supply chain, right? Those are a little bit less risky services, and if they can hire my company, for example, to go in there and do the installation, new devices, take the old ones out, maybe even to do the data erasure right there on site and pull stuff out in one fell swoop, there's a lot of benefit to that to customers. And I think the great thing about that is it drives incremental revenue and margin to your bottom line without taxing your operations, right? So you can grow your revenue without having to go get a bigger facility. So I think that's probably the biggest opportunity, in my opinion, at least for our organization. That's what we're really focused on, is try to get as sticky as possible, sell up the supply chain as much as possible.
I've also seen growth in the industry in repair and refurbishment, being able to extend the life of something even longer. And take something that's a C grade and move it up to a B grade or A grade. So I think that's a growth area for the industry to try and recover more value as the margins compress. You can build more margin into those kind of processes.
I think the other interesting thing is going to be is as the OEMs are touting, circular economy and circularity, everybody's circle washing these days, in my opinion. But if you really understand what circular economy is, it's not just because you recycle something properly; it's circular. But being part of Ingram Micro and sitting down with these large OEMs, there's more of a focus for them to start capturing that additional revenue stream they haven't gotten in the past. They've always just kind of turned an eye to it because it's kind of a dirty space, and now they're starting to want to control that a little bit more. So I think getting aligned with OEMs to service them in any capacity they may want you to do, maybe it's just logistics, maybe it's just refurbishment, repair, maybe it's dismantling, et cetera. I think, again, going back to the plastic situation, who's going to pay for all this stuff? If the OEMs start getting pushback for producer responsibility, they're going to be the ones funding it. They may want to get involved more and start controlling more of that. I don't know. It's just kind of a shot in the dark there. But again, being exposed to a lot of the OEMs and sitting in these QBRs they have with the Ingram distribution folks, hearing them talk about the secondary market, there's a lot more chatter at that level now. So kind of going back to the as a service thing, if you're not attaching your services to the front end of the supply chain, by the time that device is coming out of service, if you haven't sold it up here, you're too late. Right? So I think that's going to be an opportunity and a threat at the same time. Right? You're either going to be part of that and attached to it, or you're not. And same thing with the leasing side of it.
Right. We're seeing the same thing. We're adding supply chain solutions because of we have a parts division as well. So we can part stuff out as it comes in, test it, recertify it, and then put it back into the OEM supply chain and other people's supply chain. So that's another add-on service. So we're trying to diversify our revenue some.
Okay. My last question, so get ready with yours, is what's the most important advice that you can give to the ITAD firms that are here today?
Find your differentiator, right? I think. I mean, there's a lot of me too in this industry, right? So find your differentiator. Are you really good at recycling and can pay on scrap? Do you have really strong on-site services? What is your differentiator? And then, and go with it, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing in my mind. Is it reporting? Is it whatever it is? Just focus on that. So.
And I agree. Differentiation is key, and understanding where you are strong and where you're weak. But then also having a vision for where you want to go and executing to that vision. Don't just wing it. You need to have a plan and execute to the plan.
Sounded like a consultant.
Yeah, and if you need help with that,
By the way.
That's what I've done.
I think my perspective is, you guys know my history. I started a little small company called Green Asset Disposal back in 2003. We basically sold a service. We used to outsource everything to Integra and HMR and various companies. We never owned our own operations. And I think doing it right from the start, my dad actually was a salesman for me, and he was in sales for Motorola for years, and he wanted to help me build this business. And one thing I learned from my dad is he always did things the right way. He sold things the right way, he did the deals the right way, he never cut corners. He built his house on rock, right? He always was very transparent with his customers, and his customers loved him. They always want to give him more. So I think be transparent with your customers, don't cut corners, do things the right way, build your house on rock. I think number one, though, honestly, is to hire great people. This is a very small industry, as you guys know, and it's a lot of jaded folks in this industry sometimes, I've learned, because of various changes. So don't be afraid to hire from outside. Find good talent, find the right athlete, and train that athlete to play the position right. I've always heard this growing up as a young man, thinking, no, that's just whatever. You just hire the best person, or hire the person who has the biggest book, or whatever else it is, another right person to hire. But really find the right talent and invest in those people. And this is another, I hate to say cliche or thing that you've heard for years, is find the right partners, right? Going back to adding other services. So if you don't have technicians in Ohio and you have a customer in Ohio, find a partner there you can rely on to deliver additional services. We do a lot of good things as Ingram Micro. That's really core to exactly what we do. But I can tell you right now, we have a lot more services we offer and deliver through partners than we do ourselves. And had we not had those partners, those capabilities, those partnerships, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I can tell you that right now. So the power of partnerships, if you don't believe in it, trust me, believe in it. It'll get you a hell of a lot farther than you will by yourself or just with your own team.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir.
wondering what you guys do to cover your liability with the insurance stopgap completely, and make it just covered with escrow or nothing at all.
Yeah, for us, it's just typically a cap. I mean, our kind of general rule of thumb is based on the profit or revenue expectations we would get from that client. We try to assign some sort of a multiple to that we kind of let the sales team say, I don't know, just for ease of math, if the customer's going to bring you $1 million a year in revenue, maybe you want to do 5x revenue is kind of your cap, right? And obviously you can go as high as you want. Obviously it's going to depend on how large your policies are, right? What you want to go up to. But we've always tried to do that, and it's usually been pretty successful. And if the customer says, well, that's not enough, I say, well, listen, as your business grows with us, we can put something in there to where it's always a multiple of revenue. So if you did $100,000 with us last year and it's a 5x policy, we'll give you $500,000. And if in 2 years from now you're doing $2 million, then maybe we give you $10 million or something like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but and obviously Ingram's got their own obviously corporate policy levels, and we always try to stay well below what they offer. But I'm not sure how the separate individual policies work, because there's pollution liability, there's automobile liability, there's your umbrella policy coverages, et cetera.
And looking specifically at cyber, whether you guys even look at that or not, or don't worry about that as liability, or how you manage it.
We have it, and maybe Brent and some of the guys that talk to the customers more than I do, it's more of a checkbox kind of thing. They require it in an RFP or within their contract that you maintain a minimum of a $1 million cyber liability policy, or maybe it's $5 million or whatever else. And if they're asking for 5 and you have 1, we'll go back to the customer and say, listen, we're happy to go to 5, but here's your charge now to go do that. Or if you're okay sticking at $1 million, then they're fine. Then they usually, okay, we're good with that.
And if the customer doesn't require it, it can be a point of differentiation
Right.
to set you apart from others. So having it's not a bad thing. I know in other insurance policies, I'm not sure specifically about cyber, but the underwriting of that policy is based on your risk profile. And for example, pollution or health insurance, these sorts of things. If you have mitigated those risks in some ways, then typically you can influence the price or the cost of that insurance. So that there may be some opportunity there with cyber if you've got really, really good systems and controls around eliminating any of the data excursion risk. But good thing to ask your insurance carrier.
Any other questions? We've got time for 1 or 2 more. Yes. Is that Jade? Yes, Miss Jade. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any last question? Yes.
When you said about on-site services, you meant specifically about the software data overwrite, the degaussing, the threading, the deinstall on-site inventory, kind of all of them, or did you see something more pertinent in one area or the other?
Sharon, can you repeat that from the back of the room?
I couldn't hear it all. I was gonna say it. Pick it
I'll
up.
try again. So I said for on-site services, in regards to things like software overwrite, degaussing, shredding for media, or things like deinstalling on cabling devices, rolling out whole racks, inventory, things like that. What did you see the most growth in specifically going to on-site? Just the software overwrite data destruction, or all of it, or some?
Did everybody hear the question?
For us, it's all of it, right? I mean, we want to be able to do all of those things. And, you know, we're trying to, like, even scan and reconcile on-site, I consider an on-site service, right? So it goes from A to Z.
Yeah, the one thing I would say as far as the deinstall kind of redeployment services where you're going installing, you know, setting the user settings, pulling the old one out. I think when you get into fire drills, when people are late on their Windows 10 upgrade, right, you're going to see a lot of that stuff where they're going to do it everywhere. I think outside of that, in a normal run rate business, from my experiences, when you have customers that have a large campus environment that typically have technicians on site, that's typically something they're going to handle and in-source. When you have customers who have, like, let's say a bank, for example, that's got 1,000 branches that have 20 employees at each one, it doesn't justify them having an on-site dedicated technician. So I think when you have customers that are very distributed as far as their locations, those are going to be your better candidates for doing deployment type services from my experience. Again, unless they're under the gun and they don't have the resources to do a massive project because they were too cheap or waited too long to get to the new OS that's coming out and support's going. I mean, the whole Windows 7 thing, 3 years ago when that was going away, our on-site services went through the roof, and it kind of calmed down. Now with Windows 10 coming in and 7 support going away, we're kind of seeing that same wave again.
And I'd say in data center, if you're involved in data center decommissioning services, then you know, doing things like also handling their RMAs on drives that are still under warranty, you know, helping them return those to the manufacturer and handle that in a secure way. If they're actually decommissioning a data center or a number of racks, and helping with deinstallation of the cabling and that sort of thing, because a colo data center is going to require that you leave it clean. So that those services in the data center certainly can be pretty broad.
Yeah, and to build on that, this goes back to where your virtual bench comes in handy, because I wouldn't know what to do with raised flooring, I wouldn't know what to do with cables, I wouldn't know what to do with the big, you know, the big power supplies, or a lot of customers have generators out there that they've bought, right? And they have to get the data center back to how the leaseholder had the space first, and you got to find a way to get rid of those generators. So I've always encouraged my team to go out and say, what are all the possible services within a data center or the end user computing kind of environment? And what are all the capabilities we need? We should go out and find out one of these partners to keep on the bench, so when that opportunity comes, we don't say, hey, let's all get back to you. We've got someone to go to right away to be able to offer that service.
Well, I want to thank you all for showing up today. We're all, the four of us are going to be here all day today and tomorrow if you have any other questions. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.